The critical period hypothesis in language acquisition. When learning about the process of language acquisition, two approaches are normally distinguished: the behavior approach and the nativist approach. The behavior approach. The behavior approach. Human behavior learn or behavior can be learned and new behavior learned. In this place, behavior is concerned first of all with the observable and measurable aspects of human behavior. Different communication type behavior. 1. Aggressive, 2. Assertive, 3. Passive. For example, passive, you win. Assertive, go win. Aggressive, I win. The nativist approach. The nativist theory is a biological base which asserts that humans are pre-programmed with the innate ability to develop language.
What is the critical period hypothesis? TR is the period across which full native competence possible when acquiring the language. This period is from early childhood to adolescence. Acquisition the theoric side that adults do not acquire the language as well as the children because of external and internal factors, not because of a lack of ability. Although the learning rarely achieved a near native accent, many people suggest this is due to them being beyond the critical period. Critical period. The critical period are the time frame during which the stimulus must be experienced in order for a certain stage of development to be achieved. Imperating the listing of hyper due to exposure of the certain stimulus. Comparison critical the period in the hypothesis that children and adults. The children is different than adults. The critical period in hypothesis. The children, for example, learning Louis with how the confusing, brain the plasticity, influencing, acquire the accent, develop good listening. In adults is different. Memory limitation, not influencing enough, accent the pronouns affect. Full control of syntaxis de morphology. Vocabulary acquisition de limited.
The case of Jenny. Jenny, she was a girl abused for her father, Clark Wiley. Her father was a man raised in different orphanage. As an adult, he was a soldier in the Second World War. He was very aggressive. He hated the noise and the children. Even so, he married Irene Oglesby, an immigrant woman, very humble and without education. Became pregnant by 4 times. The first baby was abandoned in a garage and died shortly after. The second baby died due to problems in childbirth. The third baby was born and was called John, and 5 years later Jenny was born. At 22 months of age, her father tied her in a straitjacket in her room. Her father fed her and Jenny was forbidden to emit any noise, otherwise she was brutally beaten. To sleep, his father put her to bed in a wire cage. The case of Jenny was discovered by his mother. The case of Jenny. Jenny, she was a girl abused for her father, Clark Welly. Her father was a man raised in different orphanage. As an adult, he was a soldier in the Second World War. He was very aggressive. He hated the noise and the children. Even so, he married Irene of Lesbi, an immigrant woman, very humble and without education. Irene became pregnant by 4 times. The first baby was abandoned in a garage and died shortly after. The second baby died due to problems in childbirth. The third baby was born and was called John, and 5 years later Jenny was born. At 22 months of age, her father tied her in a straitjacket in her room. Her father fed her and Jenny was forbidden to emit any noise, otherwise she was brutally beaten. To sleep, his father put her to bed in a wire cage. The case of Jenny was discovered by his mother, who blind from cataract went to the hospital and raised suspicion. One day, a social worker came to the house and found a Jenny, who could not talk and walked as as an animal. His parents were found guilty, but the father committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. His mother was dismissed but lost custody of his children. She disappeared. Jenny was in the hands of doctors and psychiatrists. They used it for scientific purposes. In that time when the learned behavior and the origin and development of language were investigated, the science determined that she suffered from mental retardation and learning problems. In a few months, Jenny learned several dozen words, but its use was very limited. She disappeared. Jenny was in the hands of doctors and psychiatrists. They used it for scientific purposes. In that time when the learned behavior and the origin and development of language were investigated, the science determined that she suffered from mental retardation and learning problems. In a few months, Jenny learned several dozen words, but its use was very limited.
What is critical period hypothesis? History. The first to introduce a critical period hypothesis were Wilder Penfield and co-author Lama Roberts in their book Speech and Brain Mechanics in 1959. Penfield and Roberts' main study was a neuroscience of language, concluding that language was dominant in the left hemisphere of the brain. They add to these results that children up to the age of 9 can learn multiple languages. They state that young children who are exposed to different languages find it easier to switch between languages and without having to translate from their native tongue. The other was Eric Lambert. In 1967, Eric Lambert further studied the critical period hypothesis in his book Biological Foundations of Language. Lambert is considered to be the father of critical period hypothesis and the one who made this theory a popular topic. He supports Penfield and Roberts' belief of children having a certain amount of time to acquire language, and after this time the acquisition of the first language will be nearly impossible. Lambert also approved the position that the reason for this critical period is due to neurological developments. He presents that until the age of 13, language is present in both hemispheres of the brain. After this age, the functions of the hemispheres become more clear. Cap and language is most dominant in the left hemisphere. Therefore, language acquisition is more difficult to acquire after this split.
In conclusion, many researchers do believe that this critical period marks that people after a certain age will have a harder time in learning a second language. Recent studies show evidence that there is not a direct correlation between an early standard more successful learning. In research conducted by Sinox and Munich, both research showed that the learners at age 11 consistently show the higher levels of proficiency than those who began learning language at age 4-8. It is argued that more natural learners incapable of making faster initial progress in acquiring grammatical and lexical components of learning due to higher level in cognitive development. The critical period hypothesis is definitely acquired when speaking on first language, but it comes to second language. There are many factors that can come into play for the success in learning a second language. Some of these factors may include social and education factors, which may interfere with one's ability to learn, such as immigrants. Immigrants may not have the same ability to learn a language. Due to these factors, it may not have had much to do with age.
Interlanguage is understood as the linguistic system of the student of the second language or foreign language in each of the successive stages of acquisition, though with its pace in the learning process. The term was coined by Selinker. However, the first to discuss the concept was Corder, who established the basis for the investigation of two-error analysis model. The concept has also received other names: transient computation by Corder and approximate system by Nemser, and intermediary system by Porquier. The interlanguage is characterized by to be an individual system specific to each learner, mediated between the system of the mother tongue and the student target language, be autonomous, be burdened by their own rules, uh, be systematic and inter-variable. Systematic because it has a current set of rules, and variable because those rules are not constant in some phonemes. Be permeable to the outlook, and therefore able to undergo successive restructuring to make way for the next stage. Being constant evolution since into continued by successive stages of approach to the target language. Language variability has given rise to numerous studies. Broadly speaking, the existing literature of the subject distinguishes between systematic variation and free variation. Systematic variation occurs as a result of the influence of external factors related to the linguistic, situational, and psycholinguistic contexts. In other hands, free variation occurs when the learner makes a non-systematic and arbitrary use of two or more forms in the same discursive context, and such forms perform the same function and are used in tasks that require the same processing condition. Also, the balance of the interlanguage can also be affected by the phenomenon of fossilization. Interlanguage training. It consists of two structures. Latent structure of the language where is where we find the primary learning and latent psychological structure that is formed by five processes. Latent process language transfer. In this case, the student is based of their mother tongue and transfer the grammatical rules of the third mother tongue in the target language. Transfer of training. The student is influenced by the didactic procedures that were used to study the target language. Strategy of learning. The learning process is influenced by a cognitive process, for example, translation, memorization, etc. Communication strategies are given by compensation for their limited linguistic competence. Resort to mimicry, searching for the meaning or question the meaning of the word.